UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your hosts, Dr. Dean Bertram and Jenn Durrell.
Hey, baby.
Hey, baby.
I am so excited that we have 3 paranormal investigators with us tonight. It's not very often that we get to chat about haunted homes or a documentary based on one. When I first saw this documentary, I was so happy to see their detective-style investigation techniques and the fact that everyone involved seemed very close with the homeowner. It was refreshing to see the impact this haunting had on everyone, which in turn made this documentary more relatable. So, without further ado, tonight we have John and Amy Bullard plus Sabrina Ross from the new paranormal documentary, The House in Between.
Just for those of our listeners who haven't seen your documentary, which is absolutely fantastic, by the way, could you give us a little bit of a background and an overview of the story, John?
Yeah, so the house in between, it basically focuses on a residential house that is not your typical haunted house. It's built in the 90s, so this isn't your Addams Family house. And it's in a small town in Mississippi, Florence, Mississippi. And it's just one of those things that, I didn't do a lot of private residences as an investigator. I did a lot of historical locations, and I had some bad experiences with some private residence locations. Everybody thinks their house is haunted, and usually there's a rational reason of why it's not haunted. And we walked into a couple experiences that just kind of put me away from doing private residences. But a friend of a friend reached out, and I met Miss Alice. And as soon as I got to this house and met Miss Alice, I could tell how genuine she was, how scared she was, and I had an experience within an hour inside the house myself, and I knew this was something a little different. I didn't know how different at the time, but that kind of snowballed into a decade plus long investigation on and off of just digging deep into the house. And it's like a puzzle. Every time we would uncover something, I found a piece, but then there's 2 or 3 other pieces that are missing now. So every time we answered a question, there's like 2 or 3 more questions that would come up. So I have a short attention span, so it's incredible that I've been doing this for, I think, 12 years now total as of today. But the house is just always ever evolving. There's different entities and spirits that are inside the house. So what started as a, lonely one night private investigation snowballed into a decade long journey, and now this documentary. And the documentary itself is unique because it's paranormal, it's science, and it's human interest. So it's not a spook show. It's not like you're watching Ghost Adventures, which is a great show. But this documentary is definitely something that's unique. So I think that whether you're a skeptic, whether you're a paranormal fan, I think this can reach such a broad spectrum of people. So I think this is really what stands out, and it's different and unique.
I really enjoyed watching the documentary. I thought you had great footage, awesome investigation techniques, and Alice's story was very intriguing. When you first started to investigate the house, what caught your attention? Was there a certain activity that you experienced or a piece of evidence that really intrigued you first?
Yeah, so what brought Alice to the point where she reached out to somebody was a light anomaly that she saw. And when they built the house in the 90s, her and her husband, they always had things happen. I mean, they had tools move, the doorbell were ringing. They knew that there was something different as they were building the house, and they kind of made peace with it until it continued to escalate. And then one night there was just this white light anomaly in her room, and that pushed her to the point where, she had to reach out. And you don't really talk about your house being haunted in the deep south because people look at you like you're crazy. So Alice did not feel comfortable reaching out until she did talk to a friend about it who's close to her, and they actually did a local news story, and then that's how I kind of got involved as well. But for me, so that was Alice's kind of breaking point. When I was inside the house the first hour, I witnessed something that Amy would witness a few years later, which was intriguing and interesting. While Alice and me were talking and she was kind of telling me her story, I saw a dark shadow figure just jolt up the stairs and just linger up the
Mm.
stairs. And I didn't say anything at the time. I didn't react. I just, because I did, when you walk into somebody's house, especially a private residence, you don't know if they're crazy. You don't know if they got some
Yeah.
psychological stuff going on. I mean, there's a lot of things that can happen. And if somebody's willing to open up their home to you in a private residence location, they're desperate. And when that happened, I walked away and I knew that was different. So as I continued to go inside the house, I had some really dramatic things happen over the first few years. And that's when we added the cameras and we added more cameras and we just kind of evolved. I believe that this house is so unique. I believe that we're teaching the spirits inside the house to react to us because once we focus on something, it
Mhm.
begins to happen and we'll
Hmm.
transition to something else and that'll begin to happen almost a direct response to us. So it's the most intriguing location that I've ever done.
Wow. I had noticed when they had showed the first shot of the ball dropping from the stairs, it seemed like there was a shadow that kind of showed up on the wall and then it dropped. So was that a shadow that you were talking about, or was that just somebody else that could have been standing there?
Yes, and I tell you what, there's throughout my years, there's not many things that I witness and see that I just sit there and freeze.
Mhm.
That clip and evidence is besides a full body apparition, that's as good as it gets.
Yeah.
Because yes, you picked it up. And another thing about the documentary that's interesting also, there's a lot of Easter eggs, which are things that we don't point out. There's light
Mhm.
anomalies, there's shadow figures, there's a lot of other
Yeah.
paranormal stuff. And we could have gone way deeper into the supernatural paranormal, but we wanted an even balance of Alice's story and science and the paranormal. So we didn't want to just push it full paranormal. And Steve, which we gave pushback back and forth, but he had a vision. Steve Gonsalves from Ghost Hunters, now Ghost Nation. He really had a great vision of what the story needed to be, and it turned out perfect. But to answer your question on the shadow, yes, that was the
Mm.
shadow up the wall, which is very similar from what I saw years ago, right when I got inside the house. So when I first watched it and reviewed the cameras, because we have trigger objects set up all inside the house. We have tons of cameras. So pretty much we have every angle covered and we log in every few days because nobody lives in the house. We can go back and obviously if something's manipulated or moved, we can backtrack it and see
Yeah.
what happened. So when we saw that, it was just absolutely, like I said, besides a full body apparition walking somewhere, I mean, that was just absolutely incredible. And when I witnessed that, the first time Amy was in the house, we actually were doing a tour. We had people come through the house and we'd show them evidence. We'd let them use the gear and just kind of experience the
Mhm.
house, which is such a unique experience. She was sitting in a chair, first time she came in the house, and I was talking mid sentence and she just froze. I could see her in the background. She got up and left and walked outside the house and slammed the front door. And I was thinking,
Mm.
like, what the hell happened? I was like, what is this? And come to find out, and this is not me having said anything about the stairway or anything like that. She saw the same thing, and then we caught that
Ah.
on footage. So obviously, if more people experience the exact same thing, it makes it more relevant.
Mhm.
I might just jump in since we're talking about Easter eggs in there. I noticed something around the 31-minute mark when we see the ball roll down the stairs at that point. It looks like there's the reflection in the mirror below it that to me looked like maybe a young girl or something. I don't know if you're aware of that or if you have any idea of whether that was a crew member or it was something that shouldn't have been there in that piece of footage.
I'll have to go
Yeah.
back and look at that because off the head. Sabrina, do you know or do you remember that?
I don't remember. I'm wondering if he may have saw the dog.
It's
Did we have the dog down there?
um I don't know. It was right at what, 30 or 31 minutes, wasn't it, Dean?
Yeah, it's a side-on kind of angle of the stairs with the ball rolling down. And as the ball starts to roll, it's what looks like a girl's head moves into the shot in the mirror and then moves out again. To me, it was the most startling moment in the film. But then again, maybe that was one of your crew there or something. I'm not entirely sure.
Was it a daytime shot of the ball coming down?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. So we'll go back and look, Sabrina, Amy, and then it may be Eileen, because that's what off the first top of my head. We need to see if it's Eileen. And if it's not Eileen, then that's super intriguing.
Yeah.
I'm writing it down so we remember.
Yeah, it really does look like a little girl, because Dean actually stopped the movie and he's like, "Did you see that?"
Well, that coincides to some other stuff that we've experienced in the house,
Oh.
so that would make it
Oh,
relevant.
really?
Yes.
I want to ask you real quick about Steve and Kendall. What was your tipping point during your investigation for you to actually contact them?
So with me doing the house for so many years, it's always good to get a fresh set of eyes on anything you do. And with paranormal community, we're all about para unity, and I want as many people coming into the house to experience what they can, because this is all a journey that we're trying to get a tipping point and really kind of push the boundaries of what this field can do. And we want the paranormal field and the science field to kind of blend together, because honestly, I mean, I think when that happens, we can do so much more than we're doing right now. And I was in the house for so many years, and I feel like I just hit a brick wall. Like, I was getting stuff, and it was incredible. And the audio that we got, which we don't put any EVPs in the film, but the audio that I've collected in this house is absolutely incredible. And if there's a part 2 to come, then we have a lot more to show the world, which we're excited about. But Brad came along, Brad Cooney, and Sabrina and Amy. We all kind of just joined forces, and everybody has their own skill set. But what we wanted to do was tell Alice's story. So I knew that we needed somebody who is a major dog in the industry. And Steve Gonsalves, one of the OGs in the paranormal. He was the original Ghost Hunters, was the show before ghost hunting was cool. And he's got such a great reputation because he's no nonsense. Steve is a ghost hunter, but he doesn't necessarily believe or has seen a lot of things that really intrigue him. So we knew how authentic the house was. So we thought there's nobody else in the field who's more hard pressed to believe than Steve. So Alice reached out to him, and he has a phobia of planes, so he doesn't fly. He drives. So he drove down to Mississippi, good old Mississippi, and he came in the house and he introduced himself. And I would say within 30 minutes, he had something pretty profound happen, and it intrigued him. It's interesting to watch him work, because you can see his the wheel turn in his head. He goes to in full discredit mode, jumping on chairs, messing with light bulbs, looking at the circuit breaker, this, that, and the other. So he came the first time and had an experience and left, and we didn't hear from him. But 3 or 4 days later, he called back and said, "I need to come back down." He drove back down and put the house to the test again. He did an experiment, and it reacted again. And what's crazy is, and I know this sounds wild, but I don't know how to explain it besides saying this, the house works for us. The entities and spirits inside the house react when they need to. I mean, he was there such a short time, both times he came. I mean, you can go to any location like the Liskak's murder house or the Winchester house. Those are definitely haunted locations, but you can go 5 times and you may only have a paranormal experience 1 out of 5 times. You know what I mean? Just because the house is haunted or a location is haunted doesn't mean you're going to get activity every time you go. So for Steve to have come and what happened to him both times, it's incredible. So after the second time he came, he said, Alice's story is so unique. This house is so intriguing. I can't figure it out. We need to get a group of people together and really tell this story. So it started off like that. And then, just as lucky as we are, we got linked up with Kendall, because Kendall Whelpton, he's done cinematography for Ghost Hunters for years. He does Wicked Tuna. His skill set is just incredible. I mean, it's awesome to have him on there because he makes us all look like rock stars. His eyes just really, really incredible. The drone shots he does, and he's a master of his craft for sure. So he got on board with their crew, and it kind of went from there. And this story started small. I mean, we knew it was a good documentary. They really wanted to tell Alice's story. And what you see in the documentary, the investigation, we didn't have a ton of time. We filmed on and off for, a few years, but they didn't live in Mississippi for a year or two. It was just so fast and so, on the go. For everything that was collected in the documentary, it just kind of worked out. Like it started as a small project and it just kind of grew and grew into what you guys see.
So, what exactly is Alice's story? I mean, like from the beginning, she moved in, what was it?
1990 is when the house was built. Her and her husband built the house. And like I said, she always had activity in the house, and they had small things happen where they felt like there was something there, but it never pressed her and really bothered her. But the light anomaly, she was sleeping one night in the bedroom, and her husband passed away actually, and not inside the house, but it was unrelated. This is years after her husband has passed. She was sleeping in the bedroom downstairs, and there's just a blinding white light anomaly in her bedroom. And she didn't know if it was UFO. She didn't know if it was extra, paranormal or interdimensional. She didn't know what it was. She couldn't take it anymore. She had to reach out to somebody and figure out what was going on. And since then, she's actually left the house. She doesn't live in the house anymore. She still owns it. She visits it during the day. She checks her mail and all that good stuff there, but she refuses to stay there and sleep overnight, which is something that really touched Steve, because this is a case where this lady, Alice, she built the house to raise her family, raise her daughter in, and now she's been pushed out of her house because the things that are happening are just so dramatic. So it really, it means something different when you can actually try to help somebody. And I've grown so close to Alice, and she's like a grandmother to me. She's just so awesome. She's the most genuine, giving person that I've ever met. So anything that we can do to help her and kind of figure out what's going on in the house. And she has no intention of selling the house because she truly believes that this house is being used for documentation, and we can kind of push the paranormal field to another level.
Does she have any activity where she lives currently, or is it just in that house?
It's just in that house. The place that she lives now is probably 30, 45 minutes away from the house. But to answer a question, which you hadn't really asked, but I'll mention it. It's not always the house is haunted. Obviously, if you built a house on the land in 1990, it's more than likely the land.
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned her husband had passed away, so I was just kind of curious with that because she had seen a light, and I do have my own personal experience, which I didn't actually get to experience it, but my mom and my nephew did. My brother had passed away, and within like a week or two, they had a huge ball of light go from the kitchen into the library. It just floated, and it just came in and just kind of looked around at everybody. And it startled my mom and it startled my nephew, but they don't believe in that kind of stuff. So ever since that light, they're more open to it. So I was just kind of curious if that was on her line of thinking that maybe it was that.
That was her thought process at one time. The first time it happened, it startled her, and it did happen again since then. And we've done EVP sessions, and we've kind of pressed that angle and used that trigger name, and we've never got anything directly from her husband per se. Okay. So we don't think it's related to that, but yes, that was one of her first thoughts. Yes.
Okay.
What color was it? Was it white? Was it blue?
I think it had a blue tint to it.
And so that's interesting, and I've captured that. And actually, whenever we get off the call, I'll send you a couple of screenshots and stills that I've caught of that. And light is interesting like that. So if you think about it, basically we're all made up of energy. So if you think about a flame, like what's the hottest flame? What color is the hottest flame?
Blue.
So if you're seeing something with a bluish tint, to me, that's the strongest energy. So it's almost like it's trying to manifest into a full body. So when we capture blue tints or blue lights, I think it's just a very, very predominant, very strong energy that we're seeing.
It's very fascinating. That's one reason why I love this field. I do want to ask Sabrina and Amy some questions. This one is actually for both of them, so that way we can get to know them better. What is your favorite part about investigating the paranormal, and what actually got you interested in investigating? Sabrina can go first if she likes.
I enjoy trying to figure out what it actually is, like what's actually causing it. Because whenever you can't come up with an answer, then it's obviously out of your realm. You have to really sit and just think and put the puzzle together. So that's the challenge for me. always watched all the ghost shows and things like that. Like I'll fall asleep to
Mhm.
them. I just enjoy watching them because
Mhm.
what is it out there? That's what we're all
Yeah.
trying to figure out. So it just intrigues me to the point to where whenever I got an invite to Alice's, I was like, well, heck yeah, I'll
Yeah.
go. It started out as just like a fun thing to do every now and then it, kind of escalated from there to where the house just kind of pulled me in.
Mm. Amy, do you have
Hey,
a favorite part?
so yeah, my favorite part of investigating is getting to use different types of equipment and learning like how it works and the reason behind how it works. And also looking at things as a skeptic, just like Sabrina said, trying to figure out, is this paranormal? Is there some other reason whatever evidence we've captured is happening? So you really do have to look at it as a skeptic while you're investigating to rule out
Yeah.
anything else, to be able to say, okay, we've ruled everything else out. This is definitely paranormal. So that's really cool when we're able to do that. I got into it obviously because my husband. So we met 7 years ago and he had already been investigating for 5 years. Yeah, so we started dating and I started going to different locations with him. And I've always been very open minded to that, to
Yeah.
that there's something else out there. I had an experience when I was 11 that I think definitely helped me to be open minded about paranormal. So yeah, he got me into it and I'm stuck.
Yeah.
Stuck with it.
She had no other choice. It was
You're right.
either that or we were breaking up.
Like
So
literally
Oh no.
the first date we had, he told me
Yeah.
what he did, and I was like, "All right, I'm
Yeah.
here for it."
Yeah. So were you afraid on your first investigation then?
Actually, no. I think the lead up to it was scarier than actually going. It was really,
Yeah.
really cool. The first location that I ever went to him with was Frogmore Plantation in Louisiana. And it it was just so eye-opening and getting to see him work. And actually I had some really cool stuff happen to me there that I was able to then verify with the homeowners. And I didn't know anything about the place. I just knew I was being taken there by my
Yeah.
boyfriend. So yeah, and it opened up a whole new world for me as far as like being gifted,
Yeah.
and hear things and see things that other people can't.
Yeah. I read that in your bio and I had another question about that too. Because it had mentioned that you had kind of figured it out once you were investigating that you were sensitive. So, when did you realize you were tapping into like a different realm and what have you used to keep yourself safe?
So when I started hearing names, I didn't hear like a voice or someone talking. It was like someone was just putting things into my brain that weren't there
Yeah.
and kind of
Telepathically.
like, yes,
Hmm.
exactly.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so later talking with the homeowners at Frogmore Plantation, of course, lots of other things since then, was able to confirm that, okay, these are things that I did not know before. And now I know. And it's like someone is telling me these people are here and about themselves. And what was the other question?
how do you protect?
Oh, prayer.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
always leaving before we leave a location, say a prayer, try to kind of close off whatever portal or interdimensional space there may be, say a prayer. But we definitely had things follow us home.
Yeah.
And I was so
Yeah.
jealous whenever I took her on locations, and then I figured out she had this skill set. I'm like, well, this is.
Mhm.
I've been in this field for so long, and now you just walk in and you have this skill set that I can't tap into.
Right.
I'm like, this is not fair. So that's why I married her. Basically, I'm telling you now. So,
Aw.
no, I'm just kidding.
Well, I'm quite sensitive myself, but I've had it since I was a little kid. So, since you first realized it when you were investigating, can you think back in a time when you were younger that maybe it's like, that's what it was? I mean, did you experience before that?
There's not any one thing that I can look back and think on. Like I've always been sensitive to live people, people who are alive, like
Right. Energies. Yeah.
yes, like if being in crowded spaces was always pretty overwhelming for me because I felt like I could pick up on other people's energies and emotions. So yeah, there's not really one thing that sticks out. I mean, I remember the incident happened when I was 11. And after that, I was kind of like, are there people here around me? And I would try to like talk to people. We did like a seance, my friends and I, and we used Ouija boards growing up on and off. But really, after that experience at Frogmore is when I really started to just listen and open myself up to that side of me. That really was the opening for me.
Yeah, and I didn't realize it, and then we started giving her like a yellow notepad, and she would start writing and even sketching some a little bit. And she's also a hospice nurse, which I just think that anybody in the medical field and that side is definitely, it takes a certain skill set because I couldn't do it. But I think that it's unique that she fell into that position because I feel like she's so drawn there. I mean, because she's around death all the time. I mean, that's what she does. She's with death all the time, and she's so comfortable around it. And to me, that's not normal. Even though we're paranormal investigators and we're trying to tap in and communicate, that's a whole nother side of it. But she's just so genuine and just falls into that. So it was just, I don't know, it's weird that we met and it kind of fell into place. But I think there's a lot of people out there who I think are sensitive and have a skill set, but until you're put into that situation and you're in those locations and you're specifically trying to communicate, I feel like you may not open that window, but when you do try, you can definitely open the window.
Yeah. I think everybody's sensitive. It just depends on how open you are and how good you listen. I think everybody's got that ability. But one of my other questions was, since you're investigating and you've done a lot of investigations, have you actually formed an opinion or any type of theory on life after death?
I definitely think there are people that leave the earth and they don't come back, they don't stick around. There are people that do for whatever reason. It's unknown to me. I don't know why, but as much energy as we're made of, to me, that's kind of obvious. Yeah, we make up this energy. We're souls. We're living beings with a soul. And especially when there's some traumatic event, like a horrific murder, that's just a lot of emotion, a lot of energy. Some of the locations, that are prominent. Yeah, I definitely think there's different levels maybe to interdimensional spaces and how long people are here for, and then they pass on wherever they go. Yeah, that's just my theory.
One of my biggest things for me is I love audio, and I do analog, I do digital. The first location I ever did was King's Tavern in Natchez, Mississippi, which is late 1700s, which if you think about the United States, anything that's standing from the 1700s is old. And this place has seen so much tragedy, and Natchez was right on the river and, in the South with the plantations and cotton. I mean, it was a very, very wealthy area. And that's really what kind of sparked off and what got my journey going. So with how I got into the paranormal was I always had experiences as a child, and I don't have the skill set that you have or Amy has, but I get what I call a peek through the veil. And I, as a child, would see shadow figures. My grandfather owned a junkyard, and he would take me to old houses, and he would be collecting stuff. And there was some antebellum homes where they lived, and I would always hear voices like whispers. And as a kid, I thought I was crazy, so I didn't ever tell anybody. But when I got older, I did some research, and that's when I started going to supposed haunted places. And as you see in the documentary, if you guys watch the documentary, you see my Justin Bieber old school haircut I had on.
Yeah.
We were in a cemetery, and you hear what I hear. So that's an example of what I call a peek through the veil. Yeah. So that's like you talking to me, and I can't hone it. It doesn't happen all the time, but randomly I will hear stuff with my own ear without having any devices or anything, and I'll react. And I've gotten more used to it now than I did then, because we were actually just testing out a new camera we got in that clip right there. But I love the audio because whether you have a skeptic or whether you have a believer in the paranormal, if you're collecting audio that's like a full sentence, it's directly related to what you're doing or it's calling your name,
Mhm.
you have to, whether you call it a demon, whether it's
Mhm.
interdimensional or whether it's paranormal, you have to have a conversation. If it's not fake, then you have to have a debate of, okay, well, what is this? And that's a whole other subtopic that you could go into and talk for forever. But my theory is, and it could be totally wrong, it's just what I've gathered over the years. I think that there are people who leave. I think there are people who can leave and come back. I call them travelers. I do think interdimensional is definitely a possibility. We've had different mediums in the house in between over the years. None of them know each other. There's been some from Seattle, some from California, North Carolina. And it's interesting to see that the same consensus that they have is that this house is a portal. It's almost like a spirit hotel. There's a couple of dominant spirits that are on the property, but there are people who come here and gain their strength to cross over. And that's been
Yes.
through several different mediums that have pegged this in this one location. So, but it makes sense though, because when you go to the house, and this is why I've done it for 10 plus years, you never know what you're walking into. Like the house can be very calm. Sometimes it can be very aggressive. It can go 0 to 100 real quick. So you just never know. Every time you go, it's a different experience.
Yeah. You probably do have the ability because from what you said, you can hear. You have some type of audible knowing if you can hear something. I mean, do you think you actually hear it with your ears or is it like telepathically?
It's with my ears. I mean, I literally hear
Okay.
it. It's like you talking
Okay.
to me because that's why you hear my reaction and they had to bleep me out.
Yeah.
So I try to get used to it, but when you're in the graveyard at night,
Yeah.
and whispers in your ear, it's just uncomfortable,
Yeah.
And you have people who have life experiences that there's something that opened them up even more. So when I was, I think, 8 months old, maybe a little older, I can't remember. I was a baby. I had a surgery and I actually flatlined on the table, and they had to bring me back and use the. My wife's holding 2 fingers up, so I was 2. She knows my.
Twice. You died twice.
Oh, I died twice. I don't know,
My
but I died
goodness.
twice on the table. They had to use little paddles or whatever to bring me back. So
Yeah.
I've always been intrigued with that because there's people who have had those experiences that feel like they're more open after that. So I don't know if there's something to that or not.
Well, you definitely have a connection. Definitely do. I was actually going to go into what the psychic mentioned. She had said that there was shifts within the home. What makes you believe that we live closely with higher level dimensional realities, or which can also lead to the assumption of ETs or parallel universes that some people say a portion of ourselves already exist in. Do you have an opinion on that?
So the interdimensional, and I think in the next 5 to 10 plus years, and that's why we wanted to bring science and physicists and everybody into the documentaries, because that needs to be focused more. One of my favorite things with the documentary is the Tesla, the quote at the beginning of the documentary, because I really think that's something that's gonna just kind of break the field wide open. And when Jill came in and talked about the shifts, that's profound and it makes sense with what's going on because not everything is just dealing with the dead and the supernatural
Yeah.
and you think about time. So one example, and this is just it's kind of related. So with the recorders that I use doing audio, I record in slow motion a little bit. It's a few seconds lag. So whenever I play my audio back, it sounds like I'm drunk. But a lot of times the audio and the EVPs that I get are in real time. So
Yeah.
whenever I'm lagged and behind, their voices that are coming through are in real time.
That's awesome. Sorry.
Notice
Yeah, it is.
and also go into like vocal tones and because that's a whole nother thing because we have a software so it can analyze your vocal tone and just like fingerprints are unique, your vocal tone's unique as well. And throughout the years, there is 2 dominant spirits in that house, which is female and male, and we given them names, Lily and Eric. That's not their names, but that's what we give them, and that's what they go by, and that's what they're responding to. And throughout the years, we have matched their vocal tones are the same throughout the years. So again, whether you're a skeptic or not, we have to have a conversation because it's relevant and we have it documented.
Something I found very interesting in the documentary was the mention that there's a large amount of limestone deposits under Florence. And I'm always interested in window areas, and people like John Keel have often commented that they're in areas with that type of, I suppose, mineral deposit where there's a strange electromagnetic frequency that might give play to paranormal or supernatural phenomenon. Do you think that that could be a partial explanation, at least, for what's going on in the Mississippi house?
We do, and that's unique. And really what I'm trying to do now, and what we're all trying to do, Sabrina, Amy, everybody, we're trying to push it more above just your typical equipment that we use. And we're not going to give too much away, but yes, the limestone, almost if you think about it, and Steve mentioned in the film, it's like a supercharged battery that the house can plug into and build that energy off of with the mineral deposits. And that associates with water too. Think about the Stanley Hotel, which is obviously the Shining's based off of. I believe they're set on a huge amount of limestone on there as well. So the correlation of a lot of locations that are haunted with water nearby or limestone deposits, I mean, it makes sense. Like they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff now in the scientific field. Like they're recording sound and wavelengths on crystals and all kinds of just funky stuff. So there's definitely something to that. And I love that we put that in the documentary because it's historical and it's educational also. But yes, to answer your question, I do think that there is something with that and associated with the consistency at the Mississippi House. Because again, this is the most consistent place that I've ever been. It's like, you want to roll the dice in Vegas and go to the best casino, give your best odds to win the jackpot. If you want to have a paranormal experience, your odds coming to the Mississippi House, it's very high to have an experience to take away from.
I guess there's another question I have regarding possible explanations for the type of manifestations and experiences that happen in the house. There's this idea that if there's been an area where there's been any real personal problems or anything that's happened to the residents of the house, there might be an increase in psychic activity. Do you know if there's any backstory of there being any kind of calamities in that house or any social problems with the owner or anybody else who's lived there?
That's a great question. By the way, you guys asked really good questions. I'm excited that we did this podcast.
Thanks.
To answer that question, I would say yes, but I won't openly talk about it because I've never been asked that question. But I'll just say yes.
Okay. I like to look at all the different angles, and I'm sure Jen would have asked you this anyway, but while we're kind of looking at various explanations, was a body ever found on the property? I know you started to look for one, and I don't think it was ever really resolved in the documentary. Is that another path that you guys are continuing to travel down?
We're waiting for that part two. We're excited for everybody to continue to watch The House in Between and rent it and keep it hot and fresh. But yes, there's so much of the journey left. And what I tell people also is think about this. This is not a huge Hollywood blockbuster. Like we got together with Steve and Kendall and we formed a crew. Corey, our editor, who is, Corey Frost, he does a lot of stuff with ESPN. He's like Emmy nominated. We got so blessed to get this crew of people who are just so talented. And we were like, hey, Corey, we can do this for you. He's like, okay. So we all kind of worked together, and the success and how this documentary has been received is awesome because this is something that was different, and we didn't know if it was going to be well received or not. And, we have a lot of positive reviews. There's also people, that were disappointed because they wanted more evidence. They wanted more of a spook show, and we get that, but that's not what we were going for. But that is a big part of it. And definitely the land obviously is a big story with the house. And we are, it's not finished, but we're definitely, we're pressing forward to give everybody the answers I think they want to know, because it did leave a lot of questions, and we want to get the answers for everybody.
That just makes us all want part two.
It's left open-ended, we want to continue to try to find the answers as well.
It's neat to see that this process with this documentary has really helped Alice. I mean, she got to the point where even during the day, like she just didn't want to be at the house, but to see all these people come together to help her journey and tell her story has really meant a lot to her. And again, if you met her in person, she's the sweetest, most just selfless person. I mean, she does anything for everybody. She's just She would give you the shirt off her back. She's great. So just to be able to just have her smile and see all these people put forth the effort to tell her story, I mean, it means more to me than anything in the field. I know it sounds corny and gushy and all that stuff, but if you're doing the paranormal and you do anything with a private residence and you can help somebody, I mean, it makes it worth it.
Actually, when I first watched the documentary, I was quite surprised by how thorough it was done. Of course, Steve's part of it, so it's going to be thorough. But I liked how the scientists came to play, and then you have the electrician, and I think the person that constructed the house came by too. All of that was perfect for a great documentary. So that way you've got your proof, you've got, in case you get the haters that are going to pop up. I guess my point is this documentary was I could tell it was very personal, and I enjoyed it through and through, and I think you guys did an awesome job with it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And by the way, getting the people like the electrician and stuff to be in the film, that was an effort in itself. That's a backstory that we'll tell you. Like because they would come to check out the house, but when they realized that what we were doing and what we were trying to do and film them, they were not, they passed.
They weren't having it.
No.
They were not having it.
They were not. We went through, there was a whole list of people they just did not want to be on film. And it is authentic, from the guy who was checking the levels. He went outside and put a dip in his mouth. Like, it's one of those things. Like, that's just Mississippi. That's just authentic and raw. And you saw it. And, and Sabrina does a good job. They start playing the banjo music, and they show the big cross that's in Florence at the restaurant. And Sabrina knows. I mean, Florence is a small town. What's the population in Florence? Sabrina, do you know?
I want to say 3,000, roundabout, probably, maybe, but that's city limits and outside. So
it's a tiny little place for sure, and it's but yeah, Michael Dennon, who was on there, he's done some stuff with Ancient Aliens. His verbiage and how he explains stuff was so crucial. And another thing in the documentary, when you see Steve and them come in and they're using magnets, I'll mention that. So Steve didn't know us. I mean, he met us, but he doesn't really know us. Kendall as well. So their mindset was, we're going to film this. We're telling Alice's story, but we don't know if these people are rigging the house. They could be tricking us. But Steve's not going to put his reputation on the line if we're doing something to alter or fake something. So when you see them come in with that, we had no idea. We were just at the house. So we were just watching them do it because, again, we knew how authentic the house was. They could do anything they wanted to try to disprove it. So what you see is raw and real. And they did their due diligence to try to figure it out, why it's not supernatural, why it's not paranormal. And it worked out. And if you watch the documentary at the very end, I'm not going to say what it is, but I know you guys know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
For that to happen. So Kendall has been to over 700 haunted locations filming ghost hunters, which is insane. And he's never had something personally happen to him. And as you see, he was hopping and skipping.
Yes.
And so that, again, this documentary started small and it just snowballed. So for that dramatic stuff to happen while they were in the house, it's just like the paranormal Powerball. That's what I say.
Yeah. Yeah. But it wasn't just that, though. Because at the end, Brad ends up catching some good evidence that he caught on camera.
That was so amazing. Just and the reflection, because we have the house wired up, but it's always when you're doing those investigations, it's that one angle that you needed that you don't have. And luckily the chandelier helped us out.
Yeah, that was perfect. I loved it. At the ending, I'm like, oh, they didn't. That was great. I loved it.
Yeah, it was. And again, I know it sounds crazy, but I truly believe the entities, the intelligence that's in that house knows how important this was, and they reacted.
Yeah. They showed up. They showed out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing that you also mentioned, that you were teaching the house to speak. So how did you come up with that idea, and how did you finally realize that whoever was in the house was trying to communicate with you was actually responding the way that you thought was intelligent?
So I investigated for probably 2 or 3 years, and we had we had things happen. I knew it was an active location. We got some good audio, but the chandelier light in the house had never turned off. I'd never had it manipulated. One night I was in there and I had a cameraman filming me, and I was in an EVP session and I was asking, for a response. I always use Alice's name as a trigger name because she owns the house and she's attached to the land. So I was
Mhm.
doing the EVP session, and all of a sudden, all the lights were off in the house. The only light on was the chandelier. And I said, Lily, Eric, are you here? Can you communicate with us? Do you miss Alice being in the house? And as soon as I said that, I got a shock to the back of my neck. And this is the only time this ever
Mm.
happened to me in the house. It's almost like a dog collar if you touch an electric fence or something, or one of those bug zappers that kills flies. It was like a good shock
Yeah.
from my neck down to like my back. It scared me enough to where I jumped out of the chair and I ended up on my knee on the floor. And I didn't realize at the same time the chandelier light had drained black. So it was totally pitch black in the room. So as soon as I said that, it's like the energy was drained from the light and it hit the back of me. And it's one of those things where you never want it to happen again, but then at the same time you do because you want to document it,
Yeah.
And at that point, I'm like, okay, well, so that happened and the chandelier was turned off. So let's try to replicate it. And then we
Mhm.
started focusing on it and specifically asking, hey, if you can understand my voice and hear me, if you want to communicate and you like us being here, asking those type of questions, turn that light off again. And then boom,
Yeah.
correct response. But what's interesting is the light can be on, and there's months at a time, 2 months, 3 months, that sometimes Alice may stop by and get mail, but nobody's in the house investigating because we're busy. The chandelier will never shut off. It will never turn off unless you're inside the house investigating, specifically asking for it to turn off. Ever.
Huh.
That's documented for years. And again,
Wow.
I was in there for a couple years before this happened, but when that one thing happened, I started focusing on it and doing it. Now, going back to the objects on the stairs, I took my focus off the chandelier and then focus on the stairs. And the reason we use baseballs is, and that's one of my favorite trigger objects, is because it's heavy. It shouldn't be
Mhm.
manipulated. If you put baseballs, on the stair in your house or a table, a level table where it won't roll, the baseball should not move. It's heavy.
Yeah.
It's not like a light ball. And also the stitching on the baseball. So if a baseball is moved, if it's turned or pivoted, on camera, you can actually see that stitching. So it's a good focal point to see if it's manipulated before it moves. So that's why I
Mhm.
use a baseball. And when we started focusing on the stairwell, nothing happened. And I actually had that ball on the stairs for months. I mean, it was a long
Mm.
time. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, up one day, as we're vocalizing and talking about the stairwell, and I really need you to do this. This is very important. I need you to do this for
Yeah.
me. Guess what? Boom, and it
Huh.
started happening over and over again. So that's where I started getting teaching the spirits, because as I focus on different things, the energy and the entities start focusing on that as well and doing what I'm asking them to do.
Hmm. Wow.
It sounds like I'm crazy,
No, it doesn't.
but we have to document it, so I guess I'm not.
Yeah, no.
I have just one final question, and it's a dark question, actually. Do you, John, ever feel like you're being manipulated by whatever's in the house?
So that's a great question. There is times that, as Amy mentioned before, we've had stuff follow us back. And it's almost like, and then this is from The Conjuring, actually, it's a good representation. It's like stepping in gum. Sometimes it sticks with you. And there's things that have happened when we've come back home. We've had some light activity at the house. Obviously, our house is not haunted, and it's never stayed. But if we've had an intense investigation or something like that, we've had some stuff happen here. And the house, again, is unique because you never know what you're walking into, because I feel like there's different entities and different personalities when we go into the house each time. But I do think that there's a female there that's a little aggressive, not evil, not demonic. And I've actually been scratched to the house. And that's a whole
Mm.
nother subtopic. If you talk about demonic activity, in my opinion, and everybody has their own opinions, I think a true demonic haunting is so rare. Obviously exists, but just because you hear a growl, which we've recorded growls before died in this house, or just because you're scratched doesn't necessarily mean it's demonic. I think it could be somebody trying to communicate with you, and it's just a way of communication. It doesn't necessarily mean evil. But there is a female in the house, personally for me, that's a little darker, that's definitely manipulated me and pushed me to the limits before. I've even had like night terrors about her on the stairs. I've walked in. I remember this dream, and it gives me chills just talking about it. I open the front door of the house, and she's crouched down on the stairwell, and she's staring at me, and I'm just staring at her, and she just rushes on the stairs at me, and
Wow.
and it's crazy because you see the shadow figure on the stairwell, and several people have seen that. So there's something to that, but there's something, and I don't think that maybe she's evil, but I just think that she's very attached to the land and very protective. I think that she's pushed me to the limits a couple times where I'm not fired up to go back there. I want to take a few weeks off and not go back to the house. So manipulated, I'm not sure, but kind of push back. I think there's something there that does kind of give you pushback every now and then.
What would you recommend for someone who is wanting to start investigating the paranormal? And do you have any good pointers for them?
I think for me, with the paranormal, the first investigation I ever did, we went to King's Tavern. I had like the old analog recorder, like the little mini tape that you used to put in your answering machine back in the day, and like an old camera. So I didn't really know what I was doing. I think using your body, I think that's one of the best things that you could do. People get so consumed in the gears and the gadgets and all the stuff that you use. You have to understand that there's so many false readings. If you want to really truly investigate the paranormal, you have to get back to the basics. And that's really what we've done too, because like K2s and even REM pods, they're manipulated by walkie-talkies and even key fobs and stuff like that. While they're good and they can be useful in the field, you really have to use your body and yourself. Obviously a good recorder and video, but go in just natural and just kind of let things happen as they should. And like Amy mentioned before, be a skeptic. Whenever I was going into my first location, I wanted something to happen so bad because I wanted to validate what I experienced as a child, and I wasn't crazy, which we had happen, which is great. But you have to go in and be rational and just know that not everything's haunted, not everything's paranormal. So that's my take. Amy?
Yeah, I agree completely. Start small, don't just go all in and buy a bunch of equipment that you don't really know how to use or what it's for or the science behind it. Our bodies really are our best tools. Our senses, your sense of smell, the things that you're feeling, being in tune with where you are, the location you're investigating, and research. Doing your research, historical research of properties will definitely help lead an investigation, questions to ask and things like that. What was the land used for before? Like who owned the land? Who built the house? Who's lived in the house? Things like that. Research is key.
And to piggyback off of what she said, what I like to do is, because number one, I'm lazy. I love for somebody to research and do those bullet points and know that information, but I don't like to know anything. I think it's cool to have somebody go in who has no knowledge and just be natural, but somebody does have that historical side so they can ask the trigger names and kind of relate to it. So they have their own agenda and I'm doing my own agenda, and if we meet together, that's kind of interesting.
Right, like having one person who doesn't know anything, like me when I went to Frogmore Plantation, knew nothing about anything, and then I came away knowing slave names, who were there and had died there. Yeah, definitely having someone who knows about the property and the historical aspects, and then someone who goes in kind of blind and is able to use their gift or their bodies and things like that to gather evidence.
And Sabrina?
Don't be scared to do it. Just go in there and, protect yourself and see what you get. I personally don't like equipment per se, other than cameras and audio. Those two are my big things because cameras and audio really don't lie.
And there are good tools out there, to do baselines, to do temperature readings, and do EMF. And, there's things that are out there that are scientific that definitely work and help you to do your due diligence. And I think one of the biggest things for us is to do pure documentation and give as much raw, authentic evidence as we can. And whenever I started doing investigations and kind of branding myself just to put evidence out there, how I have my stuff set up was I do clips and snippets of like video and audio just for people, because people's attention spans are so short. There's groups that they'll upload a video of an hour and 20 minutes of them investigating, and no offense, but nobody gives a crap what you're doing for an hour and 20 minutes. People want to see what you got and then move on. And I get that, but I wanted them to have a source to where they know this is not fake. This is true. This is authentic. And look, and you guys know, the paranormal field, this is not a sexy field. This is something where you go spend, if you do one investigation, you have to understand, you have 8 cameras, you have 6 recorders, whatever, and you do a 5-8 hour investigation. That is a lot of evidence to backtrack and log to try to catch something. What you see in this documentary is some of the highlights that we've captured over a decade. So, and this is raw, authentic footage, and there is definitely a lot more, but again, I think it was a great blend of how authentic the house was, some great footage, and really tells Alice's story. But having the physicists in there and everybody who took part in it, I think it was just something unique. And I think in 2020, as horrible as this year is so far, doing something that's unique and different is hard to do. And I think we did a good job.
You guys sure did. And thanks so much for coming on the show, John, Amy, and Sabrina. We'll have to have you back on so you can keep us posted on what's going on in the Mississippi house as your investigations continue.
Yes, we would love to do that. And we're working and doing our due diligence, and we're excited to continue to press forward.
John, Amy, and Sabrina were so awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation so much I cannot wait to do it again. You definitely do not want to miss this documentary. The House in Between is beautifully shot, a true haunted home story that has great aspects for any in-depth paranormal investigation, including real science, personal stories, historical facts, and lastly, what exactly is that light? To watch The House in Between, it is available on Apple and Amazon Prime, as well as many other cable or internet on-demand TV providers. If you're interested in learning more about the Mississippi House, check out their website, www.thehouseinbetween.com. Or you can also look at their documentary on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. On the documentary's main website, you can also purchase merchandise, such as t-shirts and hats. If you're interested in learning more about John, Amy, or Sabrina, they have their own website for paranormal investigations at www.smokeandmirrorspi.com. Of course, you can always find us at talkingweird.com. If you haven't already, please like the show on Facebook and Instagram at Talking Weird Podcast. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to Talking Weird. We're available on most podcast platforms and YouTube. And if you enjoy the show, please leave us a review. Dean and I would really appreciate it. Next week, Bigfoot researcher Kenny Irish joins us to talk about his brand new book, Folklore Frankensteins, which looks at Sasquatch sightings in every state within the U.S. Until then, stay safe and keep it weird.